The GST Council, during its 47th meeting held in June 2022, recommended for withdrawal of exemption for renting of residential houses to business entities registered under GST. On 13 July 2022, CBIC had issued a notification and this exemption was made effective from 18 July 2022. After this notification, some were of the view that all the tenants are now required to pay GST on house rent, while others had a different opinion. To put an end to this confusion, the Press Information Bureau on 12 August 2022 in its tweet has given some clarifications. In short, within a span of few weeks, a lot has happened over this topic. Hello and welcome. Today let's talk about the topic GST on house rent and find answer to the question, do you have to pay GST on the house rent that you pay? Before finding the answer, let's quickly recall what was the situation before this change. This change is effective from 18 July 2022. So till 17 July 2022, whatever rent that was paid for renting of residential property was exempt from GST. In other words, no GST was applicable. And from 18 July 2022, it has become taxable for some and exempt for others. We'll shortly understand whom it's taxable and whom it's exempt. But before we do that, let's categorize tenants as those who are registered under GST, that is those who have GST identification number or unique identification number, and those who are unregistered. For example, salaried individuals, or if you are into self-employment like your business or profession where the taxable turnover is less than the threshold limit, and so on. Let's understand tax treatment for both these categories, starting with registered tenants. Let's say you are a GST registered person, that is you have your GST identification number and you rent a residential house. Let's say this residential house is going to be used for your business or profession. If so, the rent that you pay on the residential property is going to be taxable under GST. And you as a tenant are required to pay GST at 18% under RCM, that is reverse charge mechanism. RCM means the tax is paid by either the buyer or the service recipient instead of the supplier. And this tax has to be paid in cash. In other words, you will not be able to use input tax credit to make this payment. But whatever tax that you pay, you will be able to avail input tax credit of the same. Some of the examples of these registered tenants could be doctors who rent residential property to run their clinics, software engineers running their profession from rented houses. Let's say you are a freelancer and you provide service from your rented house, and employers providing house to employees as part of employment contract, and so on. So if you fall in these categories, then you will be required to pay GST at 18% and you will be able to avail input tax credit. But what if you are into supply of exempt goods or services? For example, healthcare services provided by doctors are exempt from GST. If so, you will not be able to avail input tax credit. In other words, this GST that you pay would be a cost for you. But what if this residential property is going to be used exclusively for your personal use when you are a GST registered person? If so, the rent that you pay on your house is exempt from GST. Let's say you are a self-employed professional and you have a separate office space and you stay in a rented house, and this house is used exclusively for your personal purpose. If so, the rent that you pay on your house is not subject to GST. Now let's move to unregistered tenants, that is those who are not registered under GST. Let's say you are not registered under GST and you have rented a residential property, and this property will be used exclusively for your personal purpose. If so, the rent that you pay is not subject to GST. For example, if you are a salaried individual and if you stay in a rented house, then whatever rent that you pay for the house is for personal purpose, so no GST would be applicable on rent that you pay. Let's now summarize what we have learned so far. If you are a GST registered tenant and if you rent a residential property for the purpose of your business or profession, then you as a tenant are required to pay GST at 18%. But if the same residential property is going to be used exclusively for personal purpose, then GST is exempt on such rents. For unregistered persons, if the residential property is going to be used for personal use, then no GST. So the recent change has impacted all GST registered persons when residential property is rented for the purpose of business or profession. In other words, if you are an unregistered person or if you are a GST registered person but you use the house exclusively for personal purpose, then you continue to be exempt from paying GST on house rent.